The room had gone quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something is about to happen, and everyone can feel it, but nobody wants to say so. Marcus Webb stood at the public comment microphone in a borrowed jacket, navy blue, 2 sizes too large, the left sleeve fraying at the cuff. He held a manila folder against his chest. His breathing was even. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and steady, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume to fill a room. Quote 0, he said. Quote 1. At the center of the board table, Carl Pruitt leaned back in his chair. Silver-haired, navy blazer, the particular ease of a man who had not been seriously questioned in a very long time. He let a small smile settle across his face, the kind of smile that isn't really a smile. It was a management gesture. It said, "I've seen this before. I know how this ends." He did not know how this ended. Marcus set the folder on the podium. He did not open it yet. He looked at the board, one face at a time, the way a teacher looks at a classroom before the lesson begins. Quote 2, he said. Quote 3. Pruitt's smile held. Mr. Webb, public comment is limited to 3 minutes. If you have materials you'd like submitted to the record. I do. Marcus reached into the folder. I have copies for each of you. The fluorescent lights above hummed in their usual rhythm, casting the room in flat, even light. Someone near the back shifted in a folding chair. A water pitcher sat on the board table, untouched, a ring of condensation forming slowly beneath it. Pruitt accepted the stapled pages without looking at them. You may want to read page 3, Marcus said quietly, before you finish that sentence. Pruitt did not read it, but in the back row, a woman named Diane Okafor, district compliance officer, there for a routine agenda item, picked up her copy. She read the first page, then the second. Then she turned to page 3, and something in her expression shifted, the way a face changes when it recognizes something it was not prepared to recognize. Near the door, a journalist named Priya Nath pressed her pen against her notebook and wrote 3 words, then underlined them. What Carl Pruitt did not know, what almost no one in that room knew yet, was that the man at the microphone had spent 9 years building toward exactly this moment, and he had not come alone. But to understand what happened in that room, you have to go back. Back 9 years, to a Friday afternoon in October, to a spreadsheet left open on a shared drive by accident, and a music teacher who made the mistake of looking at it. Before we get there, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from today. And if stories like this one stay with you, make sure you're subscribed. The fun is just beginning. Tell us what city you're from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching from where? Like and subscribe to the channel. More to come. Tell us in the comments who's from which country, and give us a like and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Tell us where you are now. Give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us where you're watching from. Give the video a like and hit the subscribe button. The climax is near. Share where you're from, like, and be sure to subscribe. Events are unfolding rapidly. Write your city in the chat, give it a like, and subscribe so you don't get lost. The juiciest part is yet to come. Let's get started. Get to know each other. Where are you from? Like and subscribe right now. The suspense is building. Tell us where you're watching this episode from, and reward us with a like and a subscribe. The excitement is running high. Tell us what city you're from now. Give us a big like and subscribe to the channel. There's more coming, and you won't want to miss it. 9 years before that board meeting, Marcus Webb arrived at Jefferson Middle School 45 minutes before the first bell, the same as every morning. He carried a paper cup of coffee from the teacher's lounge, the kind that went lukewarm before he ever finished it, and a canvas bag with sheet music assignments he'd graded the night before at his kitchen table, under a lamp with a bulb he'd been meaning to replace for 3 weeks. His classroom smelled like old piano felt and dry erase markers, and something underneath both of those, something particular to rooms where the same window hadn't fully closed in years. He had taped posters of jazz musicians to the cinder block walls, Miles Davis, Nina Simone, Thelonious Monk, with the corners curling up because the walls never held tape properly. In the corner sat an upright piano, slightly out of tune, with a D-flat key that stuck if you pressed it too hard. He pressed it every morning just to check. Marcus made $51,000 a year. His apartment was 12 minutes away, 2 bedrooms, a second-hand couch with a cushion that listed to the left, and a kitchen table with one leg shimmed level with a folded piece of cardboard. Elijah's room had a twin bed, a poster of a basketball player whose name Marcus could never remember, and a C major scale penciled on the wall above the desk where Elijah had practiced his fingering the previous spring. Elijah was 14. He wore the same gray hoodie 3 days a week and pretended not to care about music, even though he could play that C major scale cleanly enough that Marcus had to look away to keep from smiling. One Thursday afternoon, Elijah sat in the back of the empty classroom after school, picking out a melody on the upright with one finger. Quote 9, Marcus said without looking up from his desk. Quote 10. Quote 11. Marcus set down his pen. Quote 12. Elijah shrugged and pressed the D-flat key. It stuck. He looked at it. Quote 13, he asked. Quote 14. Marcus was quiet for a moment. The fluorescent lights hummed above them. Quote 15, he said. Elijah didn't answer, but he played the melody again, a little slower this time, like he was thinking about it. Marcus's dress shoes had needed resoling for 4 months. He'd been putting it off. There was always something else, Elijah's school trip deposit, a water bill that came in higher than expected, a birthday gift bought from the clearance shelf and wrapped in paper saved from the previous year. He didn't think about it much. This was just the shape of his life, and he knew its shape well. It was a Friday afternoon in late October when the shape changed. He was staying late to update the arts program files on the shared district drive when a spreadsheet appeared on the screen, left open by someone who hadn't logged out. The numbers on it didn't match the program receipts he had filed himself, 3 months in a row. He sat very still. He looked at the screen for a long time. Then he reached for a piece of paper and wrote down what he saw. Marcus did not go to the principal first. He went to the district's internal compliance contact, a man named Gerald Foss, whose office smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper, and whose desk was always too neat, the kind of neat that suggested nothing real ever landed on it. He laid his notes on that desk on a Monday morning, 3 days after the Friday he'd found the spreadsheet. "These are the grant receipts I filed for the arts program," Marcus said, "and these are the figures showing up in the district's allocation records. They don't match, not by a little." Foss looked at the papers without picking them up. "How did you access the allocation records?" "They were open on the shared drive. Someone left a session running." Foss nodded slowly. He picked up a pen and set it back down. "I'll look into it." "I also filed a written disclosure." Marcus slid a second page across the desk. "Dated Saturday. I wanted it on record." Foss looked at him then, a long, flat look, and said, "I appreciate you bringing this forward." Marcus walked back to his classroom. The hallway smelled like floor wax and cafeteria steam from the kitchen 2 corridors over. He passed 3 colleagues. All 3 said good morning. Nothing felt different yet. It took 11 days. On the 12th day, Marcus was called into a meeting with the assistant superintendent, a woman he had spoken to exactly twice in 11 years. and handed a document initiating a formal performance review. The review cited 3 incidents: a parent complaint from the previous spring that Marcus had no memory of receiving, a notation about classroom management, and a concern about his professional conduct and discretion. He read it twice, standing in the hallway outside her office. "There must be a mistake," he said. "The process is standard," she said. "You'll have an opportunity to respond." She closed her office door before he finished the sentence. That evening, Marcus called his union representative, a man named Phil Carver, who had a habit of speaking quietly in hallways, as if walls could testify. "Phil, I filed a compliance disclosure 2 weeks ago. Now I have a performance review that appeared from nowhere." A pause, the sound of Phil exhaling through his nose. "Marcus." Another pause. "The people above you on this, they're not people you want to make into enemies." "I'm not trying to make enemies. I found a discrepancy, and I reported it." "I know." Phil's voice dropped lower. Underscore. Quote, underscore. 33. Underscore. Marcus hung up and sat at his kitchen table in the dark for a while, without turning on the light. The next morning he arrived at school 45 minutes early, the same as always. He pressed the D-flat key on the upright piano. It stuck. He made his lukewarm coffee. He set his canvas bag down. A colleague he'd eaten lunch with for 6 years walked past his classroom door, glanced in, and kept walking without stopping. Marcus watched the empty doorway for a moment. Then he opened his gradebook and got to work. The termination letter arrived on a Thursday, 6 weeks after Marcus filed his disclosure. It came in a district envelope, the kind with the school board seal in the upper left corner, and it was waiting in his classroom mailbox between a supply order form and a reminder about flu shot clinics. He read it standing in the hallway. Then he folded it and put it in his jacket pocket and finished the school day. He taught 3 classes. He pressed the D-flat key out of habit before first period. It stuck. He let his students play through a piece they'd been working on for 2 weeks. And when the last bell rang and the last chair scraped back and the last backpack was shouldered, he sat down at his desk and did not move for a long time. The license suspension followed 4 days later. 1 letter about employment, 1 about certification. Same week, same district seal, different consequences. His landlord was understanding for 30 days. After that, Marcus packed what fit into his car: the canvas bag, a box of files, Elijah's old basketball trophy that had been sitting on the kitchen shelf since the previous spring, and moved into a room he rented by the week from a man named Gerald who lived 2 neighborhoods over and asked no questions. He called Elijah from the parking lot of a gas station, the phone pressed hard against his ear, the smell of exhaust and cold pavement around him. "Hey, Dad." Elijah's voice was careful, 14 years old, and already careful. A pause. Marcus looked at a crack in the asphalt near his shoe. Quote, 38, quote, 39. The words landed flat and clean, the way only a 14-year-old's words can. "I reported something I found," Marcus said. "That's what I did." "She said the school investigated you." "They did. That's not the same as me doing something wrong." Silence. A truck pulled out of the lot behind him. "Elijah, I have homework." The voice had gone somewhere else, somewhere further. "I'll talk to you later, okay?" "Okay." Marcus kept his voice level. "I love you." "Okay." A click. He stood in the parking lot for another minute. He did not throw the phone. He did not sit down on the curb. He put the phone in his pocket and drove to Gerald's house and carried his box of files up 1 flight of stairs and set it on the floor of the rented room, next to the canvas bag, next to Elijah's trophy. He had 1 colleague who called him after the termination. Ruth Hensley. 68 years old, retired, who had taught music at Jefferson for 22 years before him and had watched the arts program grow from a single piano and a borrowed drum kit into something that actually mattered. "I believe you," she said. No preamble, no questions. "Ruth, I kept everything, every document, every memo, everything you ever filed through that office. I made copies." Her voice was steady and practical, the way it always was. "You tell me when." Marcus sat on the edge of the rented bed and looked at the box of files on the floor. "Not yet," he said, "but I will." The hotel job started 3 weeks after he lost the apartment. 5 a.m. shifts, a gray uniform that smelled of industrial detergent, a mop cart with a wheel that pulled left. Marcus worked the third-floor corridor mostly alone, the hallway quiet except for the hum of ice machines and the occasional sound of a television through a closed door. He kept a small notebook in his breast pocket. Not for the hotel, for the documentation he was still building, mentally reorganizing every morning while his hands did the work his mind wasn't in. He did this for 2 years. Ruth called every year on his birthday, November 14th, without exception. The calls were short. She never asked how he was managing. She already knew. Quote 56, she'd say. "You tell me when." "Not yet, Ruth." "Okay." A pause. "Happy birthday, Marcus." In the 4th year, a paralegal named Serena Voss at the Education Accountability Alliance spent 14 months helping him authenticate the records he'd gathered, cross-referencing dates, pulling archived grant filings, establishing a paper chain that could survive scrutiny. She was 29 years old and wore the same pair of reading glasses every day, one arm held on with a twist of wire, and she worked with the particular intensity of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. Quote, 61, she said one afternoon, spreading pages across the conference table. The office smelled like old carpet and printer toner. Quote, 62, quote, 63, quote, 64. Marcus was quiet. Quote, 65, Serena said. She looked at him over the wire-armed glasses. Quote, 66, quote, 67. She gathered the pages carefully, tapped them square against the table. Quote, 68. He nodded. He looked at the stack of folders on the table, 9 years of receipts, memos, filings, and phone logs, organized by date and cross-referenced by category, representing every hour he had spent not letting go of something he could have let go of 1,000 times. Quote 69, Serena asked, not unkindly. Marcus looked at the folder on the table. Quote 70, he said. Quote 71. She didn't ask him to explain. She understood. 6 months later, Marcus was at the public library on a Thursday evening, using a computer near the back window. The library smelled like warm paper and the faint chemical sweetness of the cleaning solution they used on the floors. He was reading through a community newsletter when he found the agenda for the district's annual public school board meeting. He scrolled slowly. He stopped. Item 7, Arts Program Grant Review, Compliance Report, presented by the District Compliance Officer. He read it again. His hand hovered over the mouse. He pulled out his phone and called Serena. Quote, 72, he said. Quote, 73. A pause on the line. Quote, 74, she said. Marcus sat back in the library chair. Through the window, the parking lot lights were just coming on, orange and steady against the early dark. He called Ruth next. Quote, 75, he said. 3 weeks before the board meeting, Diane Okafor was working late on a routine audit when she found the first gap. She almost missed it. The archived grant files for the arts program were stored in a shared system that hadn't been updated in 4 years, and the folder structure was the kind of organized chaos that accumulates when nobody expects anyone to look closely. Diane looked closely. It was her job, and she was good at it. The gap was in the disbursement records from 9 years ago. A funding allocation had been logged. The corresponding expenditure receipts, the ones that should have confirmed where the money went, were absent, not misfiled, not scanned incorrectly, simply not there. She pulled the adjacent records, then the ones before, then the ones after. The gaps, when she laid them out, were too clean to be accidental. She sat back in her chair. The office was empty at this hour, the overhead lights on their motion sensor already dimmed to half. The room smelled faintly of the takeout container she hadn't thrown away yet. She looked at the screen for a long time. She typed a note to herself, flagged the folder, closed her laptop. She did not sleep well. The following morning, she called a colleague she trusted, a man named David who worked in records management and had been with the district for 16 years. Quote, 76, she said. Quote, 77. His voice was careful. Quote, 78. A pause, longer than it should have been. Quote, 79. Quote, 80, he said. Another pause. She hung up and stared at the wall of her office, where a laminated copy of the district's compliance charter had been pinned since her first week. She had read it so many times she could recite the third paragraph from memory. That same morning, 40 minutes across town, a journalist named Priya Nath received an anonymous message through her outlet's tip portal. It was 4 sentences long. It named the board meeting date. It referenced an arts program grant. It said the compliance report on the agenda did not reflect the full picture of what the records contained. It said someone would be there who could speak to that directly. Priya read it twice. She forwarded it to her editor with a single line. "I'm going to the meeting." Her editor wrote back, "Take a notebook. Don't call anyone from the district before you go." Priya printed the meeting agenda. She circled item 7 with a pen. She looked at the date, 3 weeks out, and wrote it on the paper calendar she kept on her desk, the one her colleagues made fun of because nobody used paper calendars anymore. She didn't care. Some things she needed to see with her own eyes, written in her own hand. She circled it again. The morning of the board meeting, Marcus ironed the borrowed jacket on the kitchen table of his rented apartment, pressing each sleeve slowly, the iron hissing against the fabric. His neighbor, Gerald, had offered it without being asked, just knocked on the door the evening before, held it out, and said, "You've got somewhere to be tomorrow." "I do," Marcus said. "Then wear something that fits the room, not the job." Gerald looked at him for a moment. "You good?" "I'm good." Gerald nodded once and left. Marcus hung the jacket on the back of the door and did not sleep much. He arrived at the district administration building 40 minutes early. The lobby smelled like floor wax and the particular staleness of a building that circulates the same air all year. He signed in at the public comment desk, received a numbered card, he was speaker 14, and took a seat in the third row of folding chairs, the manila folder on his lap, his hands resting flat on top of it. The room filled slowly. District staff, a few parents, 2 people from a teachers' association he recognized by their lanyards. Diane Okafor came in and sat in the back row, a folder of her own tucked under her arm, her expression unreadable. Priya Nath arrived 5 minutes before the start, took a position near the side door, and opened her notebook without looking around. Carl Pruitt entered last, as board chairs tend to do. Navy blazer, silver hair. He shook 2 hands on his way to the center seat, smiled at someone near the window, and settled into his chair with the ease of a man who had run this particular meeting many times and expected to run it many more. He did not look at the public comment section. Marcus watched him. His hands stayed flat on the folder. The meeting opened with routine items, budget line approvals, a facilities update, a calendar amendment. Marcus listened to all of it. He had learned, in 9 years, that patience was not the absence of urgency. It was the management of it. When the chair called item 7, Diane straightened slightly in her back row seat. Priya's pen moved. The compliance officer assigned to present the item was not Diane. It was a man Marcus didn't recognize, who read from a prepared summary in a flat administrative voice. The summary was brief. It described the grant review in general terms. It mentioned no discrepancies. Diane's jaw tightened. She looked down at her own folder. Then the chair opened the floor to public comment. Marcus stood when his number was called. He walked to the microphone at the front of the room, set the manila folder on the podium, and looked up at the board table. The fluorescent lights above hummed their usual note. The water pitcher on the table caught the light and threw a small bright shape onto the wall behind Pruitt's head. Pruitt leaned back. The smile settled into place. Marcus looked at him for exactly 1 second. Then he looked at the room. Quote, 92, he said. Quote, 93. He opened the folder. Marcus walked the room through it methodically. No raised voice, no trembling hands. Just the documents, one by one, placed in sequence on the podium like a teacher laying out a lesson plan. He described the original grant allocation. He described the receipts he had filed himself in his own handwriting 3 months running. He described the discrepancy he had found on that Friday afternoon in October, 9 years ago, on a spreadsheet left open on a shared drive by someone who had not expected anyone to be working late. Then he described what happened after he reported it. The performance review that appeared 11 days later. The termination letter in the district envelope. The license suspension 4 days after that. The arbitration process he had pursued at his own expense, without institutional support, over the following 2 years. And the ruling that had come back in his favor, completely and without qualification, 7 years ago. He paused. Quote 94, he said. Quote 95. A sound moved through the room. Not loud, just a shift. Chairs, breath, the particular silence that follows a sentence people need a moment to process. Carl Pruitt's expression had not changed. He held the stapled pages Marcus had distributed without looking at them, his thumb resting on the top corner. Mr. Webb. Pruitt's voice was measured, carrying the particular weight of a man who had managed public comment sessions for 14 years. Quote 97. Quote 98. Marcus said. Quote 99. Pruitt set the pages down without turning to page 3. Quote 100. Quote 101. Marcus said again, quietly, quote 100. 2. Pruitt opened his mouth. He closed it. In the back row, Diane Okafor had already turned to page 3. She read it once. Then she read it again, more slowly, her finger moving along the lines. Her face did not collapse into shock. It did something quieter and more serious than that. It went still, the way a face goes still when it is recalibrating everything it thought it understood about a situation. She looked up from the page. She looked at Marcus at the microphone. Then she looked at Carl Pruitt. Pruitt had not looked at page 3. Near the side door, Priya Nath wrote 4 words in her notebook and underlined them twice. The fluorescent lights hummed above the room. The water pitcher sat untouched. Someone in the 3rd row shifted in a folding chair, the metal legs scraping faintly against the floor. Marcus gathered his remaining pages. His voice stayed level. Quote, 103, he said. Quote, 104. He looked at the board, one face at a time. Quote, 105. He stepped back from the microphone. The room held the silence for a moment before anyone knew what to do with it. The board called a 15-minute recess. Diane Okafor did not stand up. She sat in the back row with page 3 open on her lap and pulled out her phone and sent a single message to the district records manager. I need an emergency pull on arts program grant disbursements, fiscal years 15 through 17. Now. Not tomorrow. Priya Nath stepped into the hallway, found a quiet corner near the water fountain, and called her editor. Quote, 106. She said, her voice low. Quote, 107. Quote, 108. Quote, 109. She hung up and went back inside. In a side room off the main corridor, Carl Pruitt stood near the window with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the low, rapid cadence of a man recalculating. The room smelled like old coffee and the particular tension of a conversation nobody was meant to hear. Through the thin wall, the murmur of the public gallery filtered in, chairs shifting, voices low and unsettled. Then the side door opened. Ruth Hensley walked in from the parking lot carrying a banker's box. 68 years old, practical cardigan, sensible shoes that had seen 40 years of school hallways. She carried the box the way she carried everything, without ceremony, without announcement. She set it on the table at the front of the room and smoothed her cardigan and sat down in the nearest chair. Marcus looked at her from across the room. "I told you I kept everything," she said simply. He nodded once. When the recess ended and the board reconvened, Diane Okafor stood up. She did not wait to be recognized. "I need to address the board," she said, "as compliance officer." Pruitt's eyes moved to her. Her voice was steady and clear. The room went very still. Quote, 116, Pruitt repeated. Quote, 117, Diane said. Quote, 118. Pruitt set his pen down. He looked at the table. He looked at the pages Marcus had distributed, still sitting in front of him, still on page 1. A board member to his left, a woman named Torres, who had been on the board for 3 years and had never heard Marcus Webb's name before this morning, picked up her copy and turned to page 3. She read it. She looked at Pruitt. "Carl," she said quietly, "did you know about this ruling?" The room waited. Pruitt did not answer immediately. He straightened the papers in front of him with both hands, the edges tapping against the table in a small, neat sound. In his university apartment, 40 miles away, Elijah Webb sat on the edge of his bed with his laptop open, watching a shaky live stream someone had started from the back of the room. He had found it 20 minutes ago by accident, following a link someone posted in a local community group. He leaned closer to the screen. He recognized the voice before he recognized the face. His father, standing at a microphone, steady, unbroken, still there. Elijah sat very still and did not look away. Carl Pruitt announced his resignation 12 days after the board meeting, citing personal reasons. The language of the announcement was careful and unassigning. Everyone who read it understood exactly what it meant. Diane Okafor's emergency records pull confirmed what the gaps had suggested. The compliance failure was referred to state oversight within 3 weeks. Diane was offered a promotion shortly after, framed in language that made clear it was a management gesture. She declined. She had already accepted a position with the state oversight body where the ceiling was higher and the work was the same work, done without the institutional weight pressing down on it. Priya Nath's story ran across 3 installments. It won a regional journalism award the following spring. In her acceptance speech, she thanked her editor, her sources, and one man who had stood at a public microphone with a manila folder and spoken without raising his voice. Marcus was in the audience. When she said his name, he nodded once. Ruth Hensley sat in the front row at the formal acknowledgement ceremony, still wearing the same practical cardigan she wore to every school event. When the district representative read the language reinstating Marcus's teaching license, misconduct notation removed, wrongful termination acknowledged in the official record, Ruth did not try to stop crying. She just let it happen, her hands folded in her lap, her chin level. Marcus reached over and put his hand briefly over hers. She nodded, without looking up. 6 months after the board meeting, Elijah drove 4 hours without calling first. He knocked on the door of his father's apartment, a new one now, slightly larger, with a window that actually closed, and when Marcus opened it, neither of them spoke for a moment. "I watched the whole thing," Elijah said. "I watched all of it." Marcus stepped back to let him in. The apartment had a second-hand table, 2 chairs, a keyboard in the corner with headphones plugged into it, a stack of folders on the shelf that didn't need to be there anymore but hadn't been moved yet. The place smelled like coffee and the faint cedar of a candle someone had given Marcus as a housewarming gift. They sat across from each other. "I should have asked you," Elijah said. "I should have just asked you what happened." Marcus looked at his son, 23 years old, the same jaw, the same way of going quiet, before he said something that mattered. "You were 14, Marcus said. "They were organized. That's not a failure of love." Elijah looked at the table. He looked at his father. "I want to hear it," he said. "All of it. From the beginning." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'll make coffee." 3 months after that, the grant program relaunched under Marcus's advisory oversight. The first cohort of student musicians performed at a community center on a Saturday afternoon. 12 kids, folding chairs, a keyboard that stayed in tune. Marcus stood at the back of the room and listened. Some things cannot be rushed. Some things simply take the time they take, and when they finally arrive, they arrive quietly. Not with fanfare, but with the particular warmth of something that was always true, finally being said out loud. If this story stayed with you, like it and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, if you knew the truth and no one would listen, would you keep the documentation or let it go? We'll see you in the next one.